National Calendar. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome back today an author that I didn't think I've seen here in Scottsdale since 1995.
It's been a while, yeah.
Gosh, Andrew Klavan. And when he came, it was the year of the movie.
That's right. That was True Crime, the movie.
It was True Crime.
That's
And even more interestingly, if I remember this right, my sister, who runs the film department at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, was premiering True Crime in New York because she and Clint Eastwood have done things together for years. And you came out here, and we did the book.
Yep.
And she sent me stuff from the museum, which I think we wound up using in the event which we staged at Borders.
Yes, we talked about, that's right, we staged at Borders. We talked about Shock to the System, which I wrote, which is a Simon Brett novel that I adapted for the movie with Michael Caine.
Right.
I remember I saw it for the first time in years because they played it at Borders. It was a great event. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I always enjoyed that, and people used to say to me, I thought your bookstore was the poison pen. Why are you taking authors to Borders? And a lot of that is just the power of our mail order made it worthwhile. It was a sort of a win for everybody.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice because we got people from both stores, and I think it was a great audience. It was lots of fun. Yeah.
It was. Well, since we started out with the movie, and we might as well get this question
All
out of the way.
Go ahead.
It's really been interesting to me to watch because True Crime was kind of the first time I was a bookseller, knew an author, and Eastwood made the movie. Now I've got Michael Connelly and Bloodwork, and more recently Dennis Lehane and Mystic River. So, but how what kind of experience was it for you? Was it your first sale to the movies?
It was by no means my first sale to the movies. I'd sold a lot of books to the movies by then, and in fact, I think The Scarred Man was the first one that ever sold to the movies, and then there were a number of the Keith Peterson books, and so they'd been optioned. And I had learned by that time to not pay any attention to it, to take the money and run and sort of figure, someday maybe they'll make it, but I'm not going to think about it. And I got a phone call. I was living in England. In fact, I had visited California, and the people who had bought True Crime at 20th Century Fox had called me in for a meeting to tell me that the project was dead. And they said, we're sorry, we messed it up, the script's no good, we have nowhere to go with it, it's just not going to happen, I took this well. I really wasn't expecting anything, went back to England, and about 3 months later got a phone call that Clint Eastwood was doing the film. And as always, I said, yeah, sure. But my agent said, no, you don't understand. When Clint says it's going to happen, it happens. And I thought, gee, that sounds like something about Clint Eastwood that would be true. And in fact, it was. When Clint Eastwood said it was going to happen, it just happened. It was filming within months after that. So that was very exciting. The picture came out well. It's one drawback, and it really, I thought was a problem in the Connelly movie too, is that Eastwood played the lead. And in my case, the character, Steve Everett in True Crime, is a 35-year-old womanizer. And to turn him into a 70-year-old womanizer didn't really sit well with the women in the audience. And the first time in the premiere, I remember the first time Eastwood kind of leaned over and made a pass at a 25-year-old girl, I could literally see the women's shoulders pull up and, this kind of tension go through the room. And I think that did not help the film at the box office. Script is good, and the direction, as always, with Eastwood is wonderful. And it's not his performance, it's just he was old for the part.
Yeah, I think that was a real problem with Bloodwork. I just recently watched it. My husband and I were on a cruise, and one night, we decided to watch the movie.
Right.
Late at night, and that was really my own reaction, is that even though he was a slightly more mature character than your guy in Bloodwork, and I'm going totally blank as to the name of the character, but the FBI agent who had the heart transplant and discovers that the donor has been murdered and that he has new life because somebody died, and her sister wants him to help. That Eastwood really was too old to make that work. And additionally, in Bloodwork, they changed the script so that you could virtually tell from the casting who the bad guy had to be.
Yeah, well, that's always a problem with
I mean, it just gave it away. And so there were a number of things about the movie that I thought lost force. Do you think that, have you seen Mystic River?
I have, yes.
Do you think that it benefited from the fact that he didn't play any parts in it?
Sure, it benefited from, well, it certainly benefited from the fact that he didn't play any parts that were too young for him, and of course the cast was fantastic, I thought. I thought that was really the best thing about the movie, was that the acting was just really good. But, I've had good experiences too. The experience of having Don't Say a Word filmed That took 10 years.
Lord.
Lord is right. I mean, I wrote the first draft of the screenplay of that. And after that, and Michael Douglas at the time, who ended up being in the movie, was attached to it, and he was going to make the movie. And then it spiraled into development hell and disappeared. And I kept bumping into people who were rewriting it. I was at a dinner party in England, and somebody said, oh, Andrew Klavan, I'm rewriting Don't Say a Word. And my friend George Green, who wrote The Juror, he called me up and he said, they've sent me Don't Say a Word to rewrite it, to rewrite. So everybody must have rewritten it by the time it made the screen. And yet that picture, though it was much changed from the book, I really enjoyed. I thought that was a very exciting thriller. And it brought the book back in paperback, which did very well, and so that was a great experience.
How did the script depart from your novel?
Well, one of the funny things about Don't Say a Word is that book came to me in terms of the final confrontation. It's a story about a small intellectual man, a psychiatrist, who comes face to face with an evil that can only be confronted physically, basically. He has to commit an act of violence to win through. And he's not a violent man at all. He's not a physical man at all. And the final confrontation in the book is very direct and brutal and goes on for pages and pages. And it was what came to me. It was the first thing that came to me about the book. And that's all gone. It's just, it becomes much more of a chase and a sort of cat and mouse game out in the cemetery where the part of the book takes place. So it really veered off in its own way. It keeps the core of the book, but it really veered off.
I often wonder why it is that Hollywood buys some novels, and then because by the time they're done, you think,
right,
why didn't they just write, you know, an original story and get on with it?
Right. I mean, the difference is when you sit down with a book, you really are in communication with a single person's imagination. If you read Dynamite Road, that's me talking to you through my stories. When you go to a movie, you are dealing with a lot of people, some of whom are solely about money. That's what they do. And that's not a bad thing, because movies can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But they have a lot of creative input. The writer gets, as everybody has heard, gets kind of moved down the totem pole and is sort of at the service of stars and directors and money people. And so the writer really becomes a sort of carpenter called in to cobble together all these various different ideas. Some of those ideas are good ideas, good ways of changing the interior life of a book into this big visual event of a film. Some of those ideas just happened because somebody with a lot of money said something and nobody had the guts to stand up and tell them it was wrong. And sometimes the director himself ruins things because his sense is too visual and doesn't concentrate enough on plot. Whenever you see a good movie, a lot of things have fallen into place. And I think that's less true of a book. I think when a good book, good writers produce a lot of good books.
Well, a good book is probably the writer in some collaboration with an editor, because I don't think that many books can be written without some sort of feedback to the writer.
Oh, of course, but it's still one imagination. Right. Jousting with the reader, you know.
But you're saying that a film is more or less a collaboration. And so, I was thinking back to, isn't Casablanca the movie that was made where they
That's the famous one. Yeah.
Made up the script as they went along?
And it's a classic of the Hollywood process of making movies. And it just, everything fell into place, you know. I mean,
were you said earlier something about you'd worked on one of the screenplays, but you yourself have not really adapted your own books to the screen?
No, I mean, the screenplay that I wrote was much appreciated. Everybody seemed to like it, but by the end of the 10-year process, it had just been, it had just vanished in the process. And I adapted a novel I wrote under the name Keith Peterson. I adapted a book called Rough Justice for Sally Field, sort of hyping a female character in the book and bringing her to the fore. But she kind of lost interest in the middle of that, so that just never happened. And I've done a draft of The Scarred Man, and I've done a couple of drafts, but nothing that's made it to the screen.